Yes, it's time. We can call this meeting to order. We do have a quorum.
I
So,
didn't get a message from Mayor Martinez, so I'm assuming he's just running late.
yeah, he's in a meeting and running late.
Okay.
Okay? And so we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. It's about 6:02. And the first item on the agenda is action on any requests for excused absences, and the mayor has sent word that he's in a meeting. He'll be here when he can get free from that meeting. And Anna Oliveira has had a car issue, and she may or may not be able to make it. And with that done, let's move on to the next item, which is the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll stand. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The next item is the approval or adjustments to the minutes from, no, I'm sorry. Are there any adjustments to the agenda tonight, or is the agenda as published where we're at? I know of no adjustments. Okay, and do we have any conflict of interest disclosure tonight? Okay, it's time for a public comment period. Do we have any requests to speak?
I don't have any requests.
Okay, so we can step aside from that one. Now we'll go on to the first agendized item, which is the adoption of the minutes. I'm looking for a motion to approve the minutes or any comment of any adjustment or changes that may be needed.
Move to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Do we have any opposition to that? Okay, if there are nobody opposing that, we'll go ahead and approve those minutes. The next item is we need to appoint a vice chair, and
Did we have roll call? Do we need roll call?
He went through and stated who was absent.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there is a correction in the minutes. I was present. It says I was absent. Oops,
that is correct. You were here.
I was here.
So I'll make a motion to accept the minutes with
As-
the change
As
that.
corrected.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes as corrected. Do we have any opposition to that? Anyone who wants to abstain? Okay, without, then we'll go ahead and move those.
I believe, sorry, can I just make a correction on here? Mr. Genetti, you were present at 6:24. Is that correct?
I came late then?
I believe so.
Because I see I voted down here and I remember being there. I may have been,
Yeah, you were absent for the first couple items.
Okay.
And then you were in attendance for items 4 through 6.
okay, I stand corrected.
Okay.
So we didn't need to correct the minutes, right?
Right, they should be correct. I can go back and check the time, but I wrote that you showed up at 6:24.
Okay,
So the original motion stands, basically.
All right,
sorry about that.
My original second stands.
and I assume our agreement to that stands as well. Okay, so the next item on our agenda is the appointment of the vice chair. And we've asked Mr. Lee Masters, Thomas Lee Masters, if he would serve in that capacity, and he has agreed. I'm looking for a motion to appoint Mr. Lee Masters as the chair. And a second?
Second.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. Unless there's some opposition or someone who wants to abstain, we'll go ahead and appoint Mr. Lee Masters as our vice chair. And the next item is the March 2019 financial reports.
Yes, this was quarter end for the 9 months of the fiscal year, so there's quite a bit of detail and reports that are here. The first 5 reports are the same 5 reports that we have for every meeting at every month. And those pretty much look about the way they should. In looking at the first report, which is the income statement, budget to actual for the general fund, the summarized version, the taxes, we're still waiting. We should be getting that secondary installment from the county anytime in the next 5 to 10 days. So we're looking to see if that makes up any of the differences from what we got in January. Licenses, those are for our business licenses. All the renewals were mailed out last week, so those revenues will start rolling in. They happen off and on all year, but the big push is always at the annual renewals, so we should start seeing that revenue come in. And then fines and forfeitures, that also comes in with the county wire in January and in May. It looks like in January, we did not receive all of the fine money that usually comes through, so we're hoping to see that in May. And if not, then we'll go back with the county and do some investigating on those monies. In the comparative income statement for the general fund this year to the same time last year, the real change is just the forfeitures. We're already above or below. We're below where we were this time last year, which takes us back to us being shorted, we think, in January. Personnel expenses, they have gone up, but we're still holding okay on our budget. There was new personnel, and of course, the MOUs were renegotiated for the public safety during the fiscal year this year. And then also in the operating costs, we had some significant studies that have been ongoing this year, which would make this year higher than last year, but still within budget. The budget to actual summary income statement for the wastewater, what we have right now is our DIF, which is the charges for service, so that's our development impact fees. They are significantly higher than we originally budgeted. There is an actual wastewater budget adjustment that will be taken to council tomorrow night to realign some of the line items to make it be more close to actual activities. Our proprietary revenues, we still have 2 more billing cycles for the fiscal period in order to get that up to budget. And then we have our other financing sources, excuse me, and those have to do, that has to do with the bond proceeds. There's a special journal entry that happens right at year end for the audit, and that's when that will line up. Our personnel, operating and capital improvement costs are right about where we expected them to be as of March the 31st. The comparative income statement for the wastewater funds this year to the same time last year, it's the charges for service, the development impact fees are just higher than we expected them to be. There was more permits pulled this year than we expected at this point. And our fees also did go up, so that is part of the reason as well. The proprietary revenues, that's our utility billing for the sewer charges for all the customers, and that's just timing that we're working out that is kind of flowing through as we get that fixed up from the way it was reported in fiscal 17-18. Same with our personnel costs. On our operating costs and capital improvements, they're about where we expected them to be based on this time this year versus last year. We've had the construction, so there's a lot more of the capital costs, and of course we've hired our internal staff at this point now and have ended the utility partners contract. So the costs are shifting when you compare the 2 years, but that's what we expected as well. The cash balance analysis reconciliation, all of our bank accounts are reconciled through April 30th right now, with the exception being the operating account. That one is done weekly, and I believe it's been reconciled through the 24th of April. But when we do the reconciliation of all the cash accounts of the almost $94 million, and we have it lined up against the types of funds that the city maintains, we still have almost $7 million positive in our general fund. It's been growing healthily, and we're hoping to maintain that and not have any of the step back that we'd had before. Are there any questions on the summarized financials?
said some of this, but I was probably moving through the numbers a little bit
Okay.
more slowly than what you were speaking about. So could we go to, there's a lot of the numbers on summary level on a lot of the different reports that are significantly changed from last year, correct? I mean, you've
As far
got
as
some.
comparing the 2
Like you
years?
have the general fund, you've got a number of them that are down, like you mentioned, the licensing and the taxes, et cetera. So some of them are significantly down from last year. Is that just the rhythm of reporting that makes them down, or is it that we're seeing a significant decrease?
No, I don't think it's a significant decrease. With the taxes, I still think that that's timing, especially with the county, them getting their software to work the way they want it to. And then I could be wrong, but I think one of our gas tax deposits came in April instead of March. So that could account for part of that as well.
All right, I guess it's charges for services. That one is a fair amount of change from what we were expecting.
The increase.
And, okay, and then when we get to the wastewater treatment,
Mm-hmm.
which is, we're going just a little fast for me, Milana. When you look at the wastewater treatment, we've got a couple of them in these. I believe you explained before I mentally actually got to the report to recheck my notes, but you've got a number of them which the other financing sources, the proprietary revenues that are a fair amount of difference from the prior reporting. So
Yes.
would you tell me again what?
Sure. The proprietary revenues on the 9-month year-to-date fiscal 18 to fiscal 19, that increase is due to the rates and getting them adjusted, as well as the increase in customers.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And
And I
then,
did hear you say rates, but I hadn't caught up to you on the report yet.
and on the other financing sources, that is wastewater treatment bond monies that have come in from the bond proceeds out of the construction account to pay for the construction costs that we've incurred to date.
Okay, and so that certainly explains the significant change.
Mhm.
And we've got the personnel services, we're actually pretty close on the money in terms of projecting and then getting the expenses up to the half-year point. We are pretty close on that one, so I don't think that the changes in our personnel, where we have gone from contracted to employees, has been a bad choice here. That looks like
No.
we're spot on with that one.
Mhm.
So, so that's all. Okay, thank you. You can go on if nobody else has any other
Any other
questions.
questions?
Yes, I have a question on page 4.
Yes.
I'm looking at the current total budget and comparing to the FY 18-19 projection. So just to clarify, when the budget was adopted, it was adopted with the understanding that there's going to be about a $5 million shortfall, is that right? Am I reading that correctly?
No, that's a positive balance.
Okay. So 5 million ahead.
Yes.
Thank you.
This $7 million supposedly surplus that we're looking at, or
The cash balance.
cash balance? When we run through June 30th, where do you think that might stand, in just a rough estimate? What's our outflow on a monthly basis roughly, Dean? Be down to about,
I want to say that it's a 2 million when you take all the payroll costs into consideration. And I know there's some other larger tickets that are coming up to close out some of the contracts we had. So there's quite a bit that's going to come up. But I think we're still going to have a fairly good, healthy, positive cash balance,
cash balance.
Right.
Okay, now,
which does not mean the equity balance.
right. Last year, when they put the budget together, they did set aside a reserve, set aside for a reserve.
We have,
Was it 10% or?
we have a goal of.
A goal, okay.
Right, there's a goal to have equity, which is the reserve, then available of 15 to 25% of our annual operating costs. So that's our goal, is to build up our reserves, our equity at that level. And that will depend on how all the numbers fall at the end of the year, but we've been moving closer and closer to that estimated amount, but we're still budgeting at a net zero basis.
Okay. So this amount here looks like we'll add a little bit to that equity
Yes,
reserve that
we
you're
should be adding to
shooting for.
equity.
Okay.
Okay. Do we need to open this for public comment? Okay, Nate.
The next part of the package is the exact same reports, but with all the line item details. So I'm not sure if you have had the opportunity to look at the detail of the reports underneath, but I thought I would just explain some of them as far as how the budget is set up when you do the comparison of budget to actual. So on the general fund, so page 1 of 17, towards the bottom, there's charges for services. And we have animal licensing that was budgeted at $90,000. But there are many line items for animal license and animal care between pages 1 and 2. So when it was originally budgeted, we budgeted at a higher level for one line item, and then the actuals are coming in all the different little pieces. So when we do the final analysis, we'll be rolling those up into one line item to make sure that we stayed close to budget. So you'll see that off and on throughout the detail.
And what's the reason for all those categories, Barry? Is there any consolidation possibilities that would?
It was at one time, if I understand it right, Nicole, you might know, but originally, all of the different licensing fees, the components, and all the animal care components had to be tracked independently because of the way the contracts were set up with the cities that we also did animal control for, which was Banning and Calamasa. So we don't any longer have a contract with Banning at all, and with Calamasa, the contract's been simplified by many degrees. So the level of detail that the cash receipts still come in at isn't necessary any longer. So one of the things we'll be doing is cleaning that up so that now things can be consolidated a little bit. We don't need to know how much owner turn-in fees we've collected anymore versus just
I
total.
noticed that going through there, there's actually, it appears to be a lot of duplication.
Yes,
And
it had to do with the location. So it was Calamasa, Beaumont, Banning, Calamasa, Beaumont. So yes, everything showed up 3 times.
well, even in some of the other accounting areas, it seems to be like, and I'm sure there's some rationale and reasoning behind it, but it makes it a little easier to look at from a layperson's standpoint if some of these things can
Rolled up.
be rolled up.
So I wanted to explain that and then.
Alana, in relation to what Mr. Beneke asked you, but do you have to maintain, and I realize it would be easier to report it to read the report on a more summary level, but do you have to maintain these for audit purposes until they're sort of run out totally?
No,
Okay.
we're now at a point where we can do some consolidation of our
All right.
systems in order to decrease the number of accounts that are there.
Thank
So specifically for the animal control. If you look at page 11 of 15, which takes you forward quite a bit, you'll see utilities listed over and over and over and over, but utilities is only budgeted for one line item. And I wanted to explain this because you'll see this all throughout the general fund and in other funds that we have set up. The last 4 digits of the account number indicates the improvement area that cost was incurred in. So we're trying to get to where we are tracking specifically the cost by the improvement areas so that we can then identify what the costs are by the improvement areas related to the assessments that are being made on the property tax bill, so we can match up real data against those assessments. So that occurs all throughout the general fund, specifically in streets and in the parks and in some other areas as well. You will see that there's multiple line items, and it has to do with those last 4 digits, which tell us improvement areas.
So those improvement areas basically are paying their fair share of the overhead costs?
Right, they are as well, but this is the specifically identified. So the utilities for the streets department in improvement area 3, so far we've paid almost $17,000. So we've identified where the power boxes are, where the water meters are, all of those in the different areas so that we can start looking at a breakout of the expenses, where they really are higher and where we can see where we need to make adjustments or not for the different improvement areas.
That makes sense.
It's a lot of detail. It's a lot of detail.
There's a reason for it, but.
Yes, there is. It's to be able to make an informed decision about assessments and what it is we need or don't need in different areas.
And if somebody were to want this summarized, you have the ability to print that out, correct?
Oh, so just one line item? Yes.
Yes.
I could do that.
Alana?
Yes.
You have, on, let's say, page 12, the top of page 12, you have travel, education, and training.
Yes.
And then, of course, you have the specific account number next to it. And then when you get down to page, is it the next one, I think? Or the one after that? Oh, no, it's the next one. Page 13, you have travel, education, and training. I didn't compare the two account numbers. Are they two different accounts?
Yes.
Let's say one's 3250.
Yes. So that first 3 digits tells me what fund it is. So 100 is our general fund. That second set of digits is the department. So it would tell me which department incurred the cost. So
So this breaks it down by department.
by departments.
Okay,
So
thank you.
3250 is streets, and 6050 is going to be our parks and rec, or, yeah, parks. Then the third set of digits tells me what the account name really is. It's utilities. The last 4 digits is a location identifier. So that's how we set it up, so we could run it in any one of those ways.
So in essence, you need the code book of numbers, to make sure you know what
Yes.
account.
Yes.
Yes.
But, this becomes important when we're trying to track what a particular department
Right.
expenses are, and to identify funds and needs for applying for grants, and to track spending of grant money within the entire budget versus just that independent grant.
Right. It also helps us know when we have staffing that perhaps has come to a point where we need to outsource, or we need to take an outsource in that contract in order to bring that labor in-house and hire someone. So it just depends on what it is we need to analyze. So we have a complicated chart of accounts, but every municipality does, but we needed them in these particular ways, again, so we could run it by fund or by department or by account itself or by the location codes.
Yes.
Right.
And again, those are.
That flexibility.
Reports can be run looking for the specific detail or grouping as may be needed for whatever purpose.
Right, right. So the pages, as I said, I've run the exact same 4 reports, but with all the line item details, so you can see what kinds of things make up, for example, fees, charges for service, or what makes up personnel costs. So all of the detail is back here that you can look at. It comes to the same totals, it's just the detail behind it. Included additionally, though, if we go in quite a ways, is the vendor payment report, which I provide to you each quarter, all of our vendors. It looks like this one.
Yes, we did
So-
request that.
Right, so that you can see, I have it run two ways, one by dollar amount, highest, down to the $10,000 mark, and then I also took the same list and sorted it alphabetically, so you could, if you were looking for a particular vendor to see if they were there, you could look at it alphabetically. And then I gave you the purpose, or what we use those particular vendors for. So those are towards the back. And I don't know if you had any questions about any of the particular vendors or what we use them for.
Member have a question?
Anybody? Anybody? The last page is our projects. And that's just a list of the projects that we have activity on. And we have some, we'll be cleaning up the list and closing some of these out when we do the full budget in June. We'll get a new CIP and we'll get all of that cleaned up. All the loose ones that need to be closed.
And of course, these are going to fluctuate and change from year to year,
Right,
depending on needs.
right. Our CIP budget is a 5-year look forward of projects that the city wants to put on the calendar, if you will, so that we can try and get those taken care of. They're like based on need, highest need, but that does shift through the year too when things happen, so.
Do we have any kind of policy regarding vendors and dollar amounts, and if we use a vendor, I guess there's a vendors list. If I'm a businessman and I want to get on, like, the city's, do business with the city, can I get on a vendors list?
We don't maintain a vendor list. What we do, though, is if there's a need for any kind of specialty product or specialty service, we go out and we look for companies that provide those things. If it's a high enough dollar amount, then we have a purchasing ordinance that we have to follow, where if it's a certain amount, you have to do an RFP and you have to get bids and quotes and you do all of that.
You know what that dollar amount is?
Yes, it's 25,000 is well, 0 to 25,000 is what the city manager has authority to sign for. 25,000 and up, we get city council approval. And then we have, I just had it this afternoon too. I believe it's up to 45,000 is an informal bidding process where you just have to call, get quotes, and have documentation to support that you've tried to get numerous quotes for what it is that you want to purchase. If it's up to, is it 200,000? 125? I know there's another level where you have to do the formal RFP, and then if it's a public project, then it's got a whole nother set of rules that you have to follow based on state regulations. So it's all lined out in our ordinance, and I actually did a summary table for the staff this afternoon that we're going to be sharing with everybody tomorrow to make sure everyone knows and stays within those parameters.
So if I look on the vendors list and I see JJ Toilet Paper Company, and every month we spend X amount of dollars with the JJ Toilet Paper Company for toilet paper, why are we using JJ for, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is, at any point in time, do we kind of monitor or check to make
Yes.
sure we're doing, even though it might not be within the big limits or anything?
Right, right. The
Because-
departments should always be looking out and getting more than one quote. We have generally, for example, if they just need quick supplies, we have Beaumont do it best. The Ace Hardware, we have Home Depot. If it's something they don't need right this moment, we have several vendors that they can look online. And each department, when they do that, is supposed to take and look at each one to see, based on need, when do we need it and how much does it cost? And they're supposed to take all that into
So you do have
consideration.
some kind of vendors list.
That we've used, yes. I
The ones you
mean,
use more frequently.
right,
Probably, yeah. Because it's convenient, you need to go to.
right. And we try to use vendors when it makes sense, use vendors in Beaumont. Hey, the thunder showed up.
Yeah, keep
so-
it in the city, that's
Right.
a good idea, but you don't want high prices either, so.
Right, so we try to be, there's a balance, and the departments know that, and they take that into consideration.
I have a point of clarity. You mentioned the process, the city manager can up to 25,000. But is he required to have 3 bids for an item? I mean, other than emergency items where you need something right now.
Right, it
But I
depends
mean-
on what it is. There are times when even I will look at an invoice and say, that doesn't seem right. And I'm usually at the end of the line because I see them when you see them, for them to be paid. And so sometimes I go back and I'll ask questions about them. But anything over $1,000, the city manager has to sign off on before we pay it. And so if there's anything that comes to his attention, or he thinks that there's something that's not being followed properly, I'm sure he has that discussion with the director of the department. But when it comes to doing purchase orders, which we're trying to push very hard right now to get everybody to just use the whole purchase order system from the get-go on, that system does require that 3 quotes be attached before anyone will hit the OK button and turn that into an actual purchase order. So we are making it a little stricter and a little stricter. So the 3 bids is something we're going to start pushing.
Yeah, you have to.
You must.
I mean, I can understand you can let one go, we need something now, but then
Right.
you need to recheck that.
Right.
Because it's those small amounts, up to $25,000,
Right.
they add up
Right.
to real money.
Right. And that's why we do have the purchase order system. It's used, but not to its full potential. And so that actually, like I said, that's coming up tomorrow where we're going to be pushing hard to get everybody to follow that a little more closely. We just, more strict and more strict. We baby step forward. So.
Do you have an idea of how many people are not using it or are using it, what a percentage is? So you can have a target of increasing. If you're at 50% now,
Well, I
you can say
know
in the
that
next year we could get it up to 75%?
anything over 25,000 is going through purchase order.
Right.
That's just how it is, and that was really the first step we took with purchase orders. Beyond that, I have 2 departments. No, I have 3 departments that will use the purchase orders for just about anything. So we're making progress, but it's still really easy to say, just go get that and not worry about the purchase order process. But we're going to start saying, no, let's be a little more diligent. Let's take this up another notch. So we're getting there. We're getting there.
So this is just a matter of getting compliance? Do we have department heads that are pushing back and saying,
Oh, no.
I don't want to do it?
No, it's just a matter of streamlining our internal, making sure that when it gets input, that everything is attached to it so that it can be reviewed by the person who needs to do the next approval level, and training and just making everyone used to it, regular schedule. The purchase orders, it depends on the authorization level, the dollar amount. They all have to be approved by me at some point, just so they can get the purchase order issued. But if it's at the city council level, we have only one person who's authorized to make that approval. And if the one person isn't necessarily available that day, we may have an issue, although I don't think we've really had that problem, not really. But what'll happen is sometimes you'll see that there's a requisition to review and the documents aren't attached. That's going to hold up the ability for you to have a purchase order. So, I mean, we're just education and making everything be consistent
And
all the time.
How are we controlling these small dollar amounts in the overall scope of the thing? Okay, if we're allowing someone to go to Home Depot, Best Buy, whatever, to purchase a small item, how are we controlling to where they're not purchasing hundreds of small items and ensuring that they're necessary?
Well, if they go and they have the authority to make a purchase there from their director, they have to bring the receipt back. It has to be reviewed and signed off by everyone, and then it comes to finance, or it goes to Todd if it's over $1,000. So it depends on what it is, but everything has approval. Everything starts at the department level that it's at, and it's up to that director to maintain control over their staff and their costs.
Okay, so
I have to interject
I
for
don't-
just a minute, only because we're off topic.
We are way off topic.
Okay.
Yeah, and we have been for a while.
Yeah, okay,
But I don't want to leave anybody with the wrong impression.
right.
People do not just decide to go to the store and buy some
No.
things and come back with receipts and get reimbursed for it.
No.
Everything is directed from the department based on need.
Mm-hmm.
Purchase orders are used. You know, somebody goes to Home Depot to pick up some things, the department head has control of that request. It's not that anybody, and there's nothing extra that's ever padded a purchase, and there's a limit on what they can do.
Right.
And then it does step up, and purchase orders are used for anything of any significant value. If there's a number of vendors who need to be in a pool, like weed abatement, we will put out a request for a number of vendors to respond so that we have a vendor, and we approve them, and then we put them like in a group, and we can call on them for that.
Right.
And then policies and procedures are in place for when it gets up to a certain point. And the reason that the city manager has the signing limit up to $25,000 is so that not everything has to come before council for approval. It used to be much more strict than that, and we eased it up a little bit and brought it up to 25,000. There's also policies in place where it can't be piecemeal, so that it's, you know, 20,000 here and then another 15,000, it goes above what the limits are. So with that, I don't want to leave anybody with the impression that there's spending that's just sort of like go out and buy stuff and show up the receipt, and then we.
I wasn't questioning the need, I was questioning that we were getting the best price.
Oh, yeah.
That there's an assurity when I see, because I see us buying office supplies from a number of vendors, or, you know, and it could be the same thing.
Okay.
I want to make sure the city gets the best price.
And they do that,
Okay.
especially
Yeah.
for the office supplies.
And
One
I-
of the first
I
things
think-
we did was get more than one vendor. We were tied to one, and we
I think
split that out.
with the vendor list, we kind of got off on that.
did.
When we get down to future agenda items, let's touch
Talk
on that.
about it?
Maybe we
Okay.
need some clarification or some training at a future point. So let's get back where we were. You were talking about the vendor list.
Yes.
and
which we
stating
don't
that it was
have a
there.
formal list, so,
Well, okay,
but we
the
have a
report
list
of the
that we
vendors,
use.
okay.
Yes, yes. So that, this is based on checks that have been written for the 9 months.
Okay.
And that's it. So I just, if there's any other questions.
I have one back at the beginning. It just always has me a concern when I see such a shortfall in the revenue. You're sure that money on the shortfall in the taxes area is coming?
Yes.
Okay. I
Yes,
mean,
it comes in
I'm looking
May.
at that and I'm saying,
I
wow,
know.
where does that come from if it doesn't come from there?
Right, it comes from the county, and you get a little bit here and there, but you get your two big payments, January and May.
Okay.
And that's it, and that's their cycle,
So we just look at that for a while till May.
Right, which we're in now, so now I'm watching the bank every day. Where's the big wire? Where's the big wire? So we can then get the reports and make sure everything landed just how we want it to.
Okay, we got you off. That finishes your report on
Yes.
the March 2019 financials, correct?
Yes, it does.
We need to,
I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, we do, we do now.
All right.
Absolutely.
Do we have any public comments on this report, in this presentation?
I don't have any request.
Okay. Okay, then the next item is,
I'm sorry, there is a recommendation to make a motion to present
yes,
financial statements to council.
so move.
Second,
okay. Anybody abstaining or voting opposed to that? Okay, then we'll go ahead and approve that. Then we move to the next item, which is the fiscal year draft general budget for review.
Yes, we have been working diligently on getting the city budget ready for fiscal '20, so we can get that to council. And we wanted to present kind of where we're at right now on the general fund. It's always the hardest one to do the budget for. So I have a high-level view of where we're at right now. The goal still is to have it at a net zero. We're not there yet, but we have a few more departmental budget meetings that we'll be going through, and we'll be making whatever cuts we need to or changes that we need to in order to get this back to a net zero on that. And then we have our other funds, which will be presented in the total city budget when we put it all together for city council approval, which will include also the CIP, the 5-year CIP budget. So all of that will be coming in June. But for right now, wanted to kind of go through the fiscal 20 budget for the general fund. So we've looked at the departments we set up last year, and we are keeping those departments segregated, and we're not pulling any other ones out separately at this time, but we're continuing to budget for them specifically. So it's a little bit of transition from what we did last year to this year for those. But those departments are finance, information technology, human resources and risk, and facilities. And finance, IT, and human resources risk were always just part of administration. So we've pulled those out, and we're trying to get a better idea of just what those specific departments cost, so we have a better idea for allocation purposes. And then facilities was kind of all over the place. Actually, some of IT was as well, but every department almost took care, well, they did. They took care of their own facility, and there was no centralized control over facility maintenance. And we've now made that so that it's got one person for oversight, and we're able to see what the costs are in total, and we can coordinate our efforts for the different facilities the city has. Our revenues, there was a forecast that was taken to the city council workshop in February, and we started with that, and then we made a few changes to the revenues in our budget. One is for waste management. We've taken that down because of the contract negotiation and not knowing exactly where that's landing, and so we've made an adjustment to the revenue and the expenses. We've taken a chunk of that out for now. The animal licensing and fees, now that we no longer have the contract with Banning, we can see what the real impact to that was, so we've made an adjustment for that revenue. And same with the Calamasa Animal Control contract, now that we have that set as well. Our miscellaneous permits, because we had pulled our permit revenues apart a little bit, we no longer have a need for so much to be budgeted in miscellaneous. We've mainly identified those different pieces, and we've got that segregated, so we've made an adjustment. Our code enforcement abatement, same thing. We've been trying to get a handle on the different types of abatements that the city has. It's not just weed abatement, but we also have property abatements and other types of fees. We've split them apart and got a better idea of what they are independently. Our public works plan check and inspection revenues, we decreased it based on how those look in this fiscal year to date, trying to get a better control on what those fees are as they come in. The city has changed their fee schedule so that it's deposit-based. And so we knew that was going to have an impact on when and how we then would recognize those revenues. So we've now taken a look at it, and we made a slight adjustment to that. The general fines revenue, historically in current year, the budget was, the way we had the forecast was not accurate, so we made that adjustment. And then we come to personnel. And in the budget that we have right now that we're working from, we're adding 2 information technology staff, and that is taking our outside service and bringing it in-house. We have an additional police department officer that would be the business liaison officer. We've added 1 more police support services in the dispatch center. And we are having an additional inspector for public works engineering in order to decrease the costs we have on outsourcing that function as well. Then we get into all the operational costs and the changes from last year to this year and kind of how we are restructuring some of our costs. The first item that we have, I just kind of did them in order of the departments, is for the city clerk's office. There's a large number of documents that need to be scanned and indexed, and so that's currently in the budget. The administration department has the $300,000 loan payment that we have to make that needed to be added. And the way that we have it set right now, because we don't have a zero net budget, there's no contingency yet. So once we get through to the end, we'll see if we have then some contingency money left over for city council. The IT department, that's where we have the decrease in the contract support services, if we're able to get the staff hired and get that taken care of. In the human resources and the risk, there's an increase in our self-insurance right now of $220,000, and so we've had to budget that additional cost in. Community development has some costs for potential environmental plan reviews, only because of our retail and industrial and commercial growth that we're seeing right now. It's hard to know when those may or may not come up, but we put that in there, and there would be a revenue to offset it as well, which we have budgeted. Community services, we've included the $100,000 sponsorship to the Cherry Festival, and we're looking into a potential new recreation program, and so that is also budgeted at this time. Animal control, community enhancement, police support, all those departments, we have increased their training in order to get some certifications done and to get everybody up to speed on some of the current items, especially with zoning changes and all kinds of things, regulations with the state. So we increased that budget. Then the police department has their replacements on their rotation. They have certain bits of equipment that have to be replaced and replenished annually in order to maintain it. Overall, it's too expensive to do all at once. So their rotation costs are included. That's approximately $190,000, which that includes the vehicles that get rotated as well. Our CAL FIRE contract, we're estimating right now that it'll have a 5% increase. Building and safety is budgeting inspection costs on the outside contractors to decrease. If that decreases, there would also be then an offsetting decrease in the revenues. It all comes together. Public Works has a decrease in their contractual services as long as they're able to get their second inspector. And it also would have additional revenues. That would be an offset. The street maintenance department has adjusted some of their line items based on need over the last 2 years because they're able to they've gotten a lot of things taken care of. They've gotten some equipment that they needed desperately to stay on top of things. So now we're into maintaining the equipment and having the supplies we need on hand in order to keep the services up. And they are budgeting some money to try and address some of the wire theft. It's very costly to replace it all at once. We're going to have to do it in pieces. And so they've started with the first bit. I think they did some this year, and they're going to continue attacking those areas where the wire theft has been the worst. The facility maintenance department is still putting their budget together, and it's decreasing our recurring costs because of the way we're able to identify needs and include some of them as part of our CIP projects. So they aren't necessarily, it has to be done right now. These are things that may be a larger scale because it would be better to do something different than to keep putting Band-Aids on the problem. And then we have our Parks and Grounds department, and they are budgeting right now $100,000 towards additional plant materials for all the medians and $100,000 to replace mulch throughout the city in order to get some of the different areas, common areas, looking nicer. Right now, our net is, we're still over budget, $268,000. And like I said, we're still working with our department heads. We have 3 meetings that I know of that are set up where we're going to continue going through numbers and going through the line items that make up all these totals and talk about projects and what is realistic and what isn't in order to bring the budget into balance before we bring it to council in June. I did include an attachment of these summarized numbers so you can see what 2016 and 17 and 17 and 18 and 18, 19 look like, and then what our 1920 budget is right now as we continue to attack it and try and get it all back in balance. So if you have any questions about the budget, the way it looks right now, I'd be happy to answer those.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
You mentioned in the summary, $262.7 thousand shortfall. It looks like in the worksheet on page 8, it says 462.
462. I reprinted it after I made a change, and I did not pick up the right page. There is a change in, let me get there, community development on page 120 in their operating costs. If you look at that number right now, it says the budget is 178,000. That has been changed. And that is what then brings it down to the 267.
Okay.
Which page are you on, Melania?
Page 120 of 123,
Did you say community development or community services?
development.
Now we'll look
Oh,
closer.
314,000. I was looking at the right line and then told you the wrong number. Yes.
Okay, and that will reflect in the report that
That line item had a
So it
change.
should be 262.7.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
any other questions from the committee? Do you have any requests from the public to speak on this matter?
I have a
Yeah.
question. I thought our CAL FIRE contract was like 3-year contract, 5-year, I mean, what, how many years?
Well, they come back every year with their
They come back every year.
increase. We haven't seen it yet, but we're just anticipating 5%.
So they don't give you more than a year-to-year contract? That's interesting.
No, and I think nationwide, there's a lot of issues right now with some adjustments in minimum wages, and I think that's very common throughout all entities that are labor-intensive and not just the ones that are coming up to the
Right.
city.
And I think CAL FIRE must have, and I don't know for sure, but they must have labor negotiations with the state.
Right.
That everything is kind of hinged on that, and I'm not sure that those have been complete at this time. So that may be part of the reason we don't know yet.
Yeah, that would be part of my expectation of why they come back all the time. I don't know for certain, but that's not unusual.
Right. Plus, this last year, we did ask to have an additional paramedic squad, and that did increase the cost for 18-19. So now we're looking to roll all of that forward.
Well, it's also an all-inclusive contract.
Yes.
So they provide the apparatus and the equipment, and so when they have to buy and replace, and the cost of things go up, so
Right.
that's also a portion of the,
Right, all their
Increase.
trucks. I know they have a replacement rotation for the fire engines, too.
The only thing is that, they got you between a rock and a hard place, because what's your alternative?
Correct.
You don't-
Say, what's your alternative?
well,
Correct.
yeah,
Have your
but
own.
we're getting off
Yeah.
topic.
Yeah,
I know, but I'm just
Okay.
saying.
It's a costly endeavor, but it's not one that I think you want to try to build yourself from the ground up either.
No, I mean, that was a decision made a long time ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at this point, I'm looking for a motion to.
Well, I have
receive-
one other question on
Oh,
the.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, the Human Resource Risk Management Department.
Yes.
Self-insurance, I understand all that. How do we, 220,000, are we looking, do we try to maintain a minimum amount or a dollar amount, and then if we dip below that, we replenish it? Is this
Well-
220,000 a replenishment, or is it just, we anticipate that, I don't know how you come to that number.
Well, it has to do with the JPA that we're a member of for our general liability vehicle, not the workers' comp, but everything else. The JPA has their own actuarial
Okay, so they
stuff,
do
and,
that.
and they come up and say, okay, this year you need to contribute into the fund, here's your dollar amount.
Okay,
And so that's what went up,
Itself.
not our workers' comp, right?
Okay.
Okay, is that it? Okay, then I'm looking for a motion to receive and file.
So moved.
One move and 1 second.
Second.
All righty. So if we have no objections or abstentions, we'll go ahead and pass on that one.
Okay.
That moves us to our next, which is our future agenda items. We had a request request, I thought last time, but it didn't hit here. We need to agendize a subcommittee to ensure and review that the changes that the finance department has implemented remain implemented, and that they are overseen to some extent by this committee.
The matrix, we talked about that last
Yes,
week.
the
Yeah,
matrix.
Matrix.
Yeah, so we need to get that on the agenda for next meeting unless there's any other discussion on that item. So we'll add that to the,
I was wondering why was it?
Yeah, I didn't see it.
yeah. I didn't see it
Sorry.
either, but
I've
we'll,
been working on the budget, and so everything else just kind of,
all right.
Sorry,
Okay,
sorry.
so you'll, okay. And then the question I'm going to kick out now, do we want a review or a report, an oversight, so that we understand the spending process, particularly of the small dollar amounts? We got off track quite a bit, but I think we all had questions. Is something the committee would like to have agendized?
I would.
so for our purchasing policy?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
I think I want to have a sense of, to Barry's point, is there a set policy of 3 bids going out? If there is, at what point does that kick in? Just an understanding of what those policies are.
Absolutely. I'll
Good.
bring
What the
my cheat
benchmarks are.
sheet that I have from our ordinance, because
And can
it's
that-
all there.
that'd be
It's
great.
just, very lengthy.
Can you handle
legal
that
verbiage.
load for our next meeting?
Sure.
All right. So anybody else have anything they'd like to see? Okay? So,
Real quick, Mr. Chairman, you've mentioned a couple of times before the thought of having something where someone goes over what formally the role of this committee is for the newer members.
And-
Is that something we still were considering?
yeah, that's really simple, so let's just add that to the agenda too, and I will handle that. And I'll touch bases with the city manager and mayor, and make sure that we're all on the
You say
same
their
page.
name and they magically appear.
Hurry up
Yes.
and adjourn.
Yeah, the code's pretty simple, but it does allow some flexibility for us to be given some direction by the city council.
Well, I think originally when this committee was established, there was like a white paper or something that put it in writing what this committee was supposed to do.
That's true.
I'd like to review that at this point in time, because we're 3 years down the road, almost 4 years down the
Okay.
road now.
Is that something that you can bring in?
I have it.
Somebody have that? Clerk's office
I
has it,
think we should have the treasurer bring it.
okay?
Treasurer's new, he's looking for that too.
Just paper, just the paper.
Just the paper.
Or
Clerk's
Nicole-
office can get you the paper.
Nicole will bring it in.
Okay.
Yes,
All right.
we'll do that.
All right.
The treasurer and the vice chair
I
in
say
the
that
same
because
boat?
she'll make sure that it's everything that is documentation that relates to us, and she'll bring it in and she'll make sure it's the most updated. Okay? Thank
All right,
you.
then that takes care of,
And thanks for keeping us on track.
thank you.
Yeah.
Sometimes we become a little intrigued with what's going on, and we get off a little bit.
We're curious.
Okay, I think that handles the future agenda items. That leaves us up for our finance director's comments. If you want to summarize, capsulize, whatever you would like to share with us. All right.
Any ideas?
Okay, and then that kicks us down to our meeting review and the treasurer's monthly finance and audit committee report to the council.
Well, there's 2 areas I think we spent a lot of time on tonight, and that's the current budget at the end of the 3rd quarter. And I guess the thing that people would look at right away was my question about revenues behind. And I think that can be easily explained. We're waiting for that May payment to hit the line, and we look pretty good. The expenses are fairly much on budget, and that'll take care of it. Then the budgeting process has begun. We have a budget for fiscal year 19 and 20, and the goal was a net zero, which I think is admirable. That's where it should be. And right now, you're looking to try and come up with $268,000, either more revenue or
That's
less expenses. That's my summary of,
Can I make a suggestion? I think it would be good if you told the council that we're putting on the next meeting agenda to do a subcommittee to track the,
no, important.
being on mark for putting in place.
The controls, the overseeing,
I think
the
the
controls
council
we
would
did.
like to hear that, so that would be good.
Got it.
Okay, that's everything that's on the agenda. Is there anything that we need to address that's not on the agenda that's appropriate to address? I'm not seeing anything. And with that said, we'll adjourn this meeting at 7:03.